Caliban watched quietly, sitting on the cold stone in the new cavern, as Lorelei taught the company of soldiers how to use their new mechanized armor. Lorelei was an exceptional teacher, and the army of around 600 men seemed to be exceptional students. Dark elves, devil men, angels, warriors from every walk of life. They all stood around Lorelei and carefully noted her speech about safety mechanisms. Volunteers that came from across the entire world on hearing a great trial was in progress and manpower was needed. The price they paid was cheap in comparison to the reward of saving the world, so many were here on their own terms, not from their kings. Caliban watched quietly as Lorelei expertly trained the newly assembled mechanized infantry unit. Mechanized infantry. The battle suits used were very low-tech, compared to the modern ones Caliban himself used during the Martian Resurgence War, but still far above the tech of the people around him. Caliban himself refitted and redesigned the suits now assembled, removing a large portion of complicated tech such as advanced targeting systems, downgrading reactors, and removing shields, choosing instead to repurpose them for a kind of war the soldiers of this world would be familiar with. Instead of plasma casters or battle rifles, heavy compound bows and scaled-up swords, pikes, and crossbows. Lining the cliffsides and forests, an army of black-scaled dragons, their presence marked only by the appearance of their glowing red eyes. The sight was nothing short of surreal, even in the strange circumstance that everyone now found themselves. The girls were all but exhausted as they reclined quietly in their bunks, the day of excitement slowly winding down as they watched the soldiers work. Taurus, the local demon lord, appeared out of the shadows and approached Cal with more caution than he felt comfortable with. It wasn't normal for someone like him to be afraid of someone else. 200 years of being who he was, to be so terrified of this one person. It felt almost shameful. What's with the scared, shuffling demon lord? With your reputation, one would think you would be a bit more bold, Caliban casually said. There was once a point when my dragons could roam the skies unchecked, unchallenged. Even the beasts of these mountains would be afraid of them. You killed one in seconds with the equivalent of a fancy kind of ballista, a weapon you can produce in numbers enough to arm an entire country. And that thing, what did you call it? A topor? Torpol? It's apparently a continent-killing weapon of unimaginable strength that could kill us all instantly. And then there are those tank things you are teaching the women to use. And now these mech things. I have this nagging feeling you are dumbing the machinery down and not showing us everything, Taurus replied. You are quite correct about that last point. And you know perfectly well why. You saw the movies, you saw the stats. 86 million dead. With the warring idiocy of this world just as much as mine, you know damn well why this rule is in place. I have to dumb it down so you can understand it, and also so it cannot be as easily abused. There is a reason why I am cooking meals and hunting game, instead of conquering the world. I know what a tyrant is. I hate tyrants, Cal replied in kind, giving Taurus a knowing side-eye. That is understandable, Taurus replied sheepishly. Look at magic, for example. Look what the obscene amount of magic power did to you. Look what it does to the dragons. Ask yourself. You already know the answer. If you had the power, would you be able to resist it? Cal looked at him with a knowing glare. Taurus lowered his head and shook it. No, he said meekly. There is my point. On Earth we didn't have magic, so we compensated with technology. And boy howdy did we overdo it. 3 world wars, 2 Cold Wars, 2 solar system wars, 1 civil war, and 3 corporate wars. Not to mention the culture wars that forced us to make certain ideals illegal. 3 billion dead, across 3 centuries. Think about that number. 300 years of history, with over 3 billion people gone within that time. Not due to age, not due to disease. Due to violence. That was my world. My objective is to give you the tools to do the job, but force you to temper your resolve so you don't abuse them. So you don't do what we did? Simple as, Cal said with a shrug. The staggering number made Taurus lose his balance and he sat down rather clumsily. 3 billion. 3 billion. We have barely had casualties above 50 million in the last 1,000 years despite several wars and conflicts. Despite my own entanglements, I cannot even fathom that many people to begin with. I figured as much. Granted, A very small quantity of people considering the last time I checked before I was whisked away by forces unimaginable was the population census. We bounced back hard after the last war with a second baby boom after the Martian Resurgence War was over. By last count, around 30 billion across the solar system with new colonies being set up across the galaxy. By the end of the century, that will likely double. Before I left, we were in an expansion era. A mass exodus of the Sol system for expansion to other stars, Cal replied coldly. Taurus had no words. The two just sat there in silence as Lorelei finished her lesson. Some of the dragons had flown in, and were securing the gold ingots from the mining effort. Some of the scholars from the temple were tallying and weighing the gold ingots, sorting through missives and messages to make sure the gold went to those who actually needed it or could make use of it. One or two of the soldiers climbed into mechs to figure out how they worked, with Lorelei's direction. The sun slowly set below the crater's mountainous walls, creating a serene, beautiful sunset that Cal simply enjoyed. The sound of a gust of wind from the right signaled the sage's arrival, her flowing cloak and elven ears twitching with the wind. Lady Soraya gently lowered herself onto the quarried stone floor but maintained her distance. Caliban terrified her, and she was the only one on the planet who knew everything about him. She waited for him to acknowledge her presence. "You just gonna float there, or are you going to ask me something?" Cal glared at her. "I wish to make a request for construction. I require mediation chambers. I cannot go until Lorelei is well enough, but I must be able to commune with the gods." "Can you build something for me, please?" she asked as politely as she could. "Sure. What specs? What am I building exactly?" Cal said, straightening himself up as he typed on his wearable. "Isolated so I can be at peace and quiet. A view of the sky, strong enough to stave off the dragon's wing gusts. Lots of plants, maybe? I can find the runes I need rather easily," she said with fear in her voice. Cal typed away at his wearable for a while and presented a hologram of a domed structure made of glass. "There you go. Greenhouse dome. Place for plants. Clear view of the sky and completely bulletproof. Technically. Should be up to your standards. Let's build it up." There, I guess," Cal said and pointed to a spot on one of the lower mountain peaks. That would be perfect. Absolutely perfect." "How long until you can build it?" she asked, genuinely surprised. Be ready by tomorrow morning. Need a special type of glass for it to be soundproofed and whatnot. Need to build that first, and that's the complicated part. We'll be done before you wake up, though," Cal said, casually shrugging. "And that is another aspect that I find disturbing. You can so casually make something so complex in such a short amount of time. It terrifies me that such complexity can be so easily trivialized." "The job she just asked for would take us years to complete," Taurus remarked coldly. "Mass production is not a foreign concept. I can easily teach you how. It's not that hard. I also have a few aces up my own sleeve for just in case, but I doubt I will ever need to use them," Cal replied calmly. "What horrors are you hiding from us under this rock? Just how far down does this factory go?" Soraya asked. Cal looked around and pointed at the northwest peak, then at the southeast peak. "That peak to that peak, straight down. That's how far down this thing goes. Takes ore directly from the planet's crust, energy from geothermal exchange with molten rock, and resources straight out of the lava layer. I can build your entire kingdom 20 times over in a few days if I wanted to." The two mages' jaws dropped in shock at the revelation. They stared at him with sheer awe. "Still, that's nothing compared to a Forge World. A concept we borrowed from a defunct franchise back in the day. An entire planet-sized factory. Billions of goods an hour on a massive scale. Food, fuel, parts, components, ammunition. What I have here is nothing. I mean nothing, even close to what we could do. And even so, this place is operating on only 14% power. If I cranked it to full, I could produce 2,000 tanks in the next 24 hours, plus several 100,000 rounds of ammo. And hell, this place took me 15 years to build, and I had the federal government breathing down my neck. I know guys who can speedrun building something 20 times this size in less than a year," Cal said with an all-too-casual chuckle. Soraya and Taurus looked at each other, sharing a death glare. "But anyway, it means nothing right now. Even with the starship tech we had, it will be many, many thousands of years before we have to care. I can see home from here, and we're too far away to bother. Cal said. What? You can see home? Soraya yelled. Yup, right there. That bright cluster of white stars right there, Cal said, pointing to a particularly bright light in the sky. Look at it with a powerful enough telescope, like the one I have, and I can see Sol. Judging from what I can tell, we are still in the local cluster. If my calculations are correct, our current galaxy is the Andromeda Galaxy satellite Messier 32. Hell of a long way from home. That one in the sky there, Cal said, pointing to the northern star, is Andromeda itself. Huh. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Nobody really knew how to respond to that revelation. Caliban could literally see his own home. He could see the star that he came from. Master Caliban, can you tell me how long you have been here? Taurus asked. About 6 months. Went to bed after yelling at a Fed, then woke up surrounded by dragons. Funny that. Cal shrugged and wandered off towards the hangars. By now, Lorelai's lesson had concluded, and she marched all the mech suits into their storage bays underground. Taurus and Soraya simply stared at each other for an uncomfortable amount of time, a sudden sense of smallness and existential dread having overcome them. Cal wandered over to Lorelai as she climbed out of her own powered armor to get into her pod. Cal grabbed her as she stepped in, and he gently cradled her in his arms. The pair smiled at each other. Caliban began to dance with her in a waltz to a music set only they could hear. She smiled at him and rested her head against his chest as they danced into the main hangar. The sight made Taurus and Soraya shudder. Such raw destructive power, and he's so strangely calm. And also the revelations that just hit them. Barely a stone's throw in galactic terms from Caliban's homeworld. The Forge World's his production ability. And also the nagging feeling that he still isn't telling the whole story. Not because he was hiding it, but because they had no way to actually ask the right questions. The soldiers left to their barracks for the night after eating their rations from the stew pot, and the dragons drifted off to do what they usually did. Tomorrow would be an interesting day as newcomers would be required to join the crew. More girls from surrounding villages to expand the tank brigade. Rumors already flowed about the crater of a new danger in the eastern lands. Rumors and speculations, to be sure, but concerning ones. Caliban went into his cathedral-like home and went to bed, blissfully unaware of the turmoil now spreading through the kingdoms around him.